HR isn't just about being nice, solving conflicts, or planning the company picnic. It's about holding the line when systems break, people unravel, and the executive team expects clarity yesterday. Welcome to Honest HR, where we turn real issues facing today's HR departments into honest conversations with actionable insights. I'm your host, Nicole Belina. Let's get honest. It's been a tough year in the workplace. SHRM's latest civility index shows incivility holding at an all-time high, 212 million uncivil acts every single day. And when tension spikes, HR becomes the shock absorber between a fraying workforce and leaders who still expect clarity, stability, and results. That's why today's conversation digs into the real pressure points of the job, such as rebuilding trust from employees, navigating some hard moments in the workplace, and speaking the CFO's language to show HR's strategic value. Joining us is Warren Wang, founder of DoubleFin, a collaborative people management and planning platform who's seen firsthand the pressure HR leaders carry behind the spreadsheets, policies, and performance metrics. Welcome to Honest HR, Warren.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, very excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So, in a recent newsletter that you published, Not Everyone Can Be in HR, you begin with HR is assumed to just be good with people. For the HR leaders listening who may feel reduced to that stereotype, what do you think people still miss about the complexity and the weight of this role?
Yeah, totally. This is a great question. I do think that people really think of HR as being kind of people person, right? Being empathetic, good at the listening, resolving conflict, all of that. But I have been talking to many HR leaders worldwide. I mean, just getting to know more about what HR does, right? All of that. I feel there are a lot of misconceptions from both people outside of HR community and also people within the HR community, right? I think that's really something probably people should try to change on that. Many of one observation I have is that it really surprised me. Like maybe for people who don't know me, I spent most of my career in finance, right? I never spent one day in HR.
Yeah.
Even though I'm doing CEO now, I take some responsibility on HR, but I'm not a traditional HR person at all. But when I talk to people, one thing really surprised me is that HR is so heavy with processes. And I think HR is probably the most process-heavy function across every function the company has, right? And that's really surprised me because I was in finance. I always thought finance is a very process-heavy function, deal with a lot of things. But then when I talk to HR, I realize they are doing a lot of things, right? Let's say benefits enrollment, onboarding, offboarding, performance management, workforce planning, all of that. Many processes touching a lot of people, potentially everybody across the company. And this is something kind of I didn't realize. I always thought when people think about it, yeah, people person, right? But this kind of process heavy aspect of HR profession is something I feel like people not understanding that enough, particularly for people outside, right?
Yeah.
And also, other than also being a people person, also HR deal with a lot of legal compliance things as well, right? Like still coming back to finance, well, we don't actually talk too much about legal thing or many other functions. They don't really touch that kind of legal or compliance. But for HR, the increasing complexity of employment law, labor law, regulation, right, make this very critical for HR's job as well. So they're not attorneys, but they have to understand the potential consequences for what they are doing, right? And this could be even part of their daily work. So in general, right, we think about HR is really combination of many different aspects, right? Like a process, like being people person, and also dealing with kind of legal compliance aspect. That's a I think it's a very complicated and a very difficult job to do. Is something I feel most of the leaders or most people don't recognize or don't realize that until really get it deep into this. I think this is something very important for HR themselves to understand this, right? Understand their value, and also for them to share and then communicate this to even the leaders they're working with, or the other people outside of the community.
Yeah, yeah, really, really good points. You're right. There is a focus on process, but then there is the expectation that HR people have to be good with people. They're people. And sometimes when you're so focused on the process, people can almost be a little disappointed by your lack of people skills,
Right.
right? So, got another question for you. As stewards of both the employee experience and organizational performance, HR plays a critical balancing role, and that can put us at the center of any trust reset, right? So, what would you say are the concrete steps, the things that you can do on any day that help rebuild trust inside an organization?
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely not an expert in HR, particular kind of operations or processes, but I feel this one is not just about building trust in employees. This could apply to any other aspect, right? Let's say when you work with people, how do you build trust in your maybe business partners, right, or whoever collaborate with you? So a few things I think people or HR community could be doing, right? I would always start with the listening and understanding your employees, their concerns, the voices, what they care about. That's super, super important. I can go back to my experiences many years ago when I start like working with at Google, right? One thing they did really well, I think, is really listening to employees, and they make you feel they care about what you think, what you care, right? So one particular thing they did is like they have this every year there's a Google Guys kind of survey, employee survey. You may think like employee survey is nothing new, right? Like every company probably does some sort of their things, right? I love that. But I personally also kind of experienced that at other employers I used to work with, right? But for many other companies I work for, I feel the survey was just like a process. It's like I just went through. I don't know what's that going to give me, right? I just a part of that task I have to finish. But the Google guys at the company give me a different feeling. The way they design the questions, right? What a question do they ask? How they structure, make you feel they care about beyond just how you perform, how you work, but also to see you as a person, right? Like many aspect how you do that, and they care about that, and also the entire structure and the process, how they communicate um, at a different level, right? It's always multiple level, like at the team level, a higher level, all the level they will have to, have the kind of sessions to show what the kind of the results, all of that, right? The different structures in the entire process make you feel they're really listening to you and that they really care you as a person. That's kind of like a feeling I really feel is very important for you to trust that the company is with you, right, on a love, even in some difficult period of time.
Sure.
Um, the second one I think would be good is actually communicated rationales, right? So the decision, I think the word thing is actually decision made is shared with people with no rationale. People think that's kind of made in a black box, and it make feel like this is like a machine, right? But if you communicate what happened, why you are making the decision, right? What's the rationale to support that? Even your employees don't agree with that, but they can see, the reason you're doing this. They can feel there's a human aspect into this decision making, and this can give them a much better chance to understand and then to realize, right, or something, right? And that's also I think is super important.
Mhm.
A third one I'm thinking is also about being consistent and authentic. And this is coming back. I used to work with marketing a lot. Is that think about when you are communicated, you have the brand, sharing that with your customers, right? You have to be very careful about what a messaging behind everything you are saying or doing here. The same thing as you work with the employees, right? your decision making, or maybe all the different department, or different things, different processes, there is always a hidden thing behind this. Is what is kind of value the company is driving? What is the message behind that? You better be consistent and also be authentic, right? That's for your employee to understand. Just say, for example, you're saying, telling everyone, hey, we need to be frugal. Now economy is bad or whatever, right? You need to cutting costs, cutting benefits, and I got people to understand. In a few weeks, a few months, your leadership team went on a luxury offsite, taking private jet or something, and that got to share it with the employees. Just imagine, right? What kind of messaging you're talking about? How can you build trust with that?
Sure.
And the last one I want to share is just you need to close the loop, right? Listening is good, it's a great start, but it's not the end. You need to close the loop, running maybe a survey or whatever, where I hear the voice, but eventually what actions you're taking, how you're doing that, how you execute that throughout the year, how you build that maybe into something, say policy change, or maybe particular things in business decision making, right? All of that. Eventually, you have to close the loop. Even you say, I don't want to do this, you have to tell your employees what you are trying to do, deal with their concerns or what they care. That's kind of my, as a somebody never spent one day in China, my thoughts.
Yeah, no, and I mean you're giving a outside of HR perspective, which is really important. And I loved your last point about closing the loop because I do think, I mean, all of your points are important, but the closing the loop piece is super important because I mean I know I've heard from people who don't work in HR, complain about the employee engagement survey, and so the general feel that is a very quick way to break trust, as an HR team, which is ask employees' opinion and then you don't act on it.
Right.
Eventually employees stop participating in the engagement survey because they're like, if you're not going to do anything with, if nothing changes, why should I bother? And really valid point about partnering with marketing to help with some of that messaging, right? To make sure that, I mean, HR people will deliver information, but you can certainly benefit from enlisting a communications professional to deliver it in a way that is authentic and will will resonate with your employees
Mm-hmm.
in a much better way. So I love those points. Um, so, in your experience, what would separate an HR leader who stays in kind of that administrative box versus one who truly becomes indispensable to the business?
Yeah, I think um, uh, I mean, first, I would say that administrating a lot of things that we're talking about, even our compliance, all of that. I would first want to emphasize that doesn't mean this is not important. I think this actually they are the must do, right? It's a necessary. It's a foundation you have to do and to do it well. But it's more important is how to do it that efficiently, right? And don't make it the only thing you are doing, right? That's important. I want to just clarify that. And then talking about being, indispensable to the business, I mean, of course, you need to make sure you will co-own the business. I think a good one I can resonate with that is when I think about my career in finance, what's the time I feel I'm most valuable to the business, or I feel the worst, not the worst, the best about myself is, I was in the FP&A, right, financial planning and analysis. Um, there's always an exercise, it's annual planning. And I work with many leaders. That's kind of the time I feel the most excited and I feel the best. It's because the annual planning is different from some all very, transactional work or very something happening every month. Let's say month end accrual or forecast something, right? It happens every month or something like that. But this annual planning force or basically is the time for you to think longer, think bigger, and also think very strategic, right? So those are kind of, I think, the three things HR leaders are always thinking about. How do they think longer, bigger, and strategic? That means you don't just about think about what happens next day, next week, right? It could be 1 year, multi-year business. And also the bigger is not just, some maybe some forms or some particular processes, but much beyond what your HR function or any particular task, but even on the business side or revenue side or cost side, or maybe even the customer side or the employee side, all of that, right? What's the bigger impact? And the strategic rationale to support whatever decisions, right? And then imagine that HR team, you are working on, with the employees, which is the biggest asset of any company. Those are really, really the foundation of any business outcome, any business decisions. So you are actually have a great opportunity to or co-own the business, work with your business partners, and drive those results. That's kind of, I think, is probably most important things for HR leader to think about.
Yeah, well, and we started the conversation talking about how, there's a lot of process in HR, right? Just by the nature of it. And I do, I kind of think about um, sort of HR professionals earlier in their career I've mentored, along the way, where oftentimes their role is very process driven. And so, to their credit, they're trying to improve processes, make things more efficient. But I often have to remind them to what end, right?
Yeah.
Just because you have so great, we have a process, but is it actually helping? What are we actually solving a business problem, or do you just like to see the process end to end? And so I think you brought up some really good points, attaching the work to to key business partners and stakeholders, and ensuring that the work that we do actually links to the business strategy of the organization, right? Solving problems and being part of that bigger picture is just so critical. So I want to, kind of switch directions here a little bit. So one of the things that you're known for is the need for HR to speak the CFO's language to show that investing in people isn't just an expense. Really important. What part of the HR story do you think HR professionals consistently fail to communicate in financial terms?
Yeah. So yeah, I have a lot of experience just working with HR and working between HR and finance. Right. I feel like there's some common things I don't see from finance perspective. Right. I see I'm missing. Multiple. One is about kind of a lack of numbers. You're talking. Let's say we are finance love quantitative stuff, right? And when you're just throwing out some qualitative stuff, it's hard for finance to believe in that, right? Say, hey, regretted attrition reduced a lot due to HR initiatives. We are saying reduce a lot, like that hurts finance brain, right? A lot. What do you mean? So this type of lack of numbers is one. Second is about lack of comprehensive and structured analysis. Like just throwing a number is also not enough. Say you do the same thing. Let's say regretted attrition reduced, let's say 18% or whatever, right, or something due to HR initiative. But this could come back to the next, right? It's about how do you define regretted attrition? How do you measure that? Right? What's the source of the information? Is that reliable?
Mhm.
And then when you're talking about this particular 18% whatever, is that 18% per quarter or per year? How do we see that? And yet it reduced, is that a quarter over quarter or year over year? Is there any seasonality built in this? Right? And can you break out by function, by region, by all of that? So you see the point is actually you have to look at the numbers from all the different angles. Why we're doing this is that we're trying to find out, is that story or whatever you're saying, is that real? It's not driven by some factors that, later on you find out is actually can tell you a total different story, right? We do see that happen all the time. People using numbers could have spin something, right? Or give you a wrong picture of the business. That happens a lot. And a lot of analysis cannot survive this level of, rigor or kind of challenges, right? But if you're showing this, you don't have to show that in your analysis, but you have that in your pocket. When, let's say, when your CFO asks you this question, you show that, hey, here's what the number says. If you do that, you just do it once, you are going to gain the confidence from CFO right away. And then they are going to trust your business, trust your decisions, trust your analysis in the future, right? So that's the second. The third one, maybe the first one I can stay that together, is about lack of strong reasoning and the connection between numbers and the story, right? This is building kind of relationship between your numbers and what your story you want to tell there, right? You say this is driven by whatever reduction in the regretted attrition is driven by HR initiative, right? You show the numbers, but how do I know that's the case, right? Like, not everything we not understand. Not everything you may find exactly the straight correlation between the two. But even if you can show some indirect, like a reference point, indirect relationship, the more you can throw up there, the more confidence they will have to support this, right? So this is basically to think about from finance, but to have a very solid, concrete analysis, right? Showing the numbers or the analysis in very different angles, but also showing the strong rationale or connections between number and the story. That's what HR win finance kind of like a mind on that.
Great advice. So, Warren, I'd love to try a fun little exercise with you. I'll throw out a couple classic workplace phrases, and if you could translate them into a couple of sentences that a CFO actually wants to hear. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds like a task for me. Cool.
Okay. All right. First one, we need to improve culture.
We need to improve culture. Okay. I would say from CFO perspective, I would say maybe we are seeing some leading indicators of performance risk, like higher regretted attrition in key roles, right? That would lower manager effectiveness scores, more kind of employee cases. And if you don't address this, the turnover or productivity is going to get bad. And that's going to change. I mean, of course, I don't have numbers here, but that's going to really put our business strategy, our revenue goal in kind of at the risk. And then here's a potential risk impact of that, and the cost of a trend of the versus the cost of fixing that. I can show you next on this.
Perfect. Let's try another one. Managers need more training.
My first reaction to anything like this, I think any CFO would hate this kind of line. It's just like, it's so ambiguous, right?
Well,
yeah.
You
So
hear training and you think expensive, right?
CFO hates ambiguity and also uncertainty. Right? So when I say managers need more training, right away, what do you mean? Like manager? What managers need more training? Right? That would be very, very specific. It's about let's say maybe its managers need some compliance training to mitigate the litigation risk or legal risks, right? Our peer companies, they just went through some lawsuits, right, would potentially cost them like a multi-million or something like that. By doing something, we can, whatever, right? Or maybe sales manager. Have to be very, very specific about what they're talking about here.
Yeah. And then the last one, turnover is high lately.
Yeah. So that I would say maybe turnover itself not necessarily a bad thing, and the high or low is also a relative term, so also not necessarily good or bad either way, right? I just put, maybe we can say, just use one example. I could say in the last quarter, we maybe say we lost X number of high performing employees in roles that take 9 months to fully ramp up to get back. And replacing them will cost us roughly how much in recruiting, or maybe how much in revenue, how much in productivity. And if we invest in the retention here, say like we use the 10% of the losses here to change that, right? Reduce the leakage by a certain percentage through some manager support and maybe particular initiatives, that can help us to avoid that from happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that advice. I think we've taken some kind of problem statements, right? Just we're kind of just blurting out these statements that are weighing on our mind, and you've helped us kind of think through them in a way that um, has some rigor behind it, has some analysis behind it, and as we've talked about earlier, is attached to um, how it could impact the business results. So thanks for reframing those statements for us.
Hopefully, I
So
survive the test.
so we're almost out of time. So I've got one more question for you. Um, if you could leave HR leaders with one final piece of advice, and you've given us lots of good advice today, Warren, when HR leaders are pitching future investments, whether it's training, better tools, a retention program, what metrics or financial framing help turn those ideas from soft initiatives into measurable ROI?
I know in my LinkedIn, I talk a lot of HR has to, to quantify this. But here I want to share a little bit of other side of this is that this also tied to my previous, I work at Google when I was at working with marketing, right? One of the toughest question or working with marketing, I was managing the marketing finance. One of the toughest question I always got is what is the ROI of marketing investment? Very, very hard to answer is because a lot of marketing activities, they're not direct revenue generating activities or anything like that is very hard. So this, what my thinking is actually what with all the business activity, think about this. The closer you are to revenue generation, the easier for you to quantify or measure ROI, right? The further away, the more difficult. And for the activity further away, maybe you take say 10 steps, 8 steps for that to translate or to pass through to the revenue generation activity, right? So for every step you have to take, your impact or whatever the signals is going to be diluted. It's going to add a lot of other things factored into here. Are going to add noises. So if you want to measure that, I think about how many assumptions you have to make to measure that, to quantify that, right? And then the more assumptions that adding here, the more potentially unreliable, less accurate, and the more room for people to challenge or to question the the soundness of your analysis. That is what I want to say is that many times I want to really hopefully everyone can see is that not everything can be measured in terms of revenue or ROI in the traditional way, right? And if you are forcing people to do this, you are basically asking people to make tons of assumptions over there with not reliable kind of like input to support those assumptions. Right? That's going to maybe a little bit different from what you were asking, but I feel it's very important to point out of that, right?
Yeah.
But that's not mean you shouldn't measure. Is that I would give my personal example. Let's just say this. Let's say we will talk about like your kids, right? You want to build some key attributes for your kids. Say you want to make your kids tougher, right? Or better personality or be a better person or whatever. You are investing in some of the maybe sports or some activity, right? To train them, to educate them. Can you measure that? I don't think anybody can measure that, right? By doing this, by spending this much, I'm going to improve the toughness by 10%. There's no way you can, right?
Right.
But does that mean you're not going to do it? I don't think so. You
Right.
are going to do it. Because what? Because you believe there's a strong, first of all, because first you care, right? Second, also because you believe there's a strong correlation between the two, right? Between doing this and then and also building a better personality or mentality for your kid. Believe in that. And then you are going to work with your, maybe your tolerance level, your income level, how much you can afford, things like that. You can figure out how much you're willing to invest. That would be probably applicable to many of the things we're doing here in HR side is that do you believe in some of the things you're working or investing? Say, if I have a high morale employee, right, highly motivated, versus somebody who are totally beaten up, don't like what they're working. If there are two same person, just different mentality, different mood here, how much productivity, how much value we can see from their work? There are going to be a lot of difference, right? Do you believe in that, right? If then, and also, do you invest in some initiatives or something that can drive that kind of motivated employee, that culture? You believe that, you better make some investment. And then you're talking about maybe in a particular way in your business environment and how much you can afford. What are some, also very important, build some very rigorous operational measurement to track the uh, how tight you manage this, how efficiently do you run this analysis, right? Combine that and build a case to support. That would be my approach, how to do this in a simplified way.
Yeah, great. So I think the takeaway, right, is again having the rigor behind it and a good analysis and justification rather than, focusing on kind of your traditional ROI. Yeah, perfect. Well, Warren, I want to thank you again for sharing your insights with us.
Always my pleasure to share what I think, and hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, lots of great advice for us for sure. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Honest HR, and we will catch you next time.
Hello, friends. We hope this week's episode gave you the candid tips and insights you need to keep growing and thriving in your career. Honest HR is part of HR Daily, the content series from SHRM that delivers a daily newsletter directly to your inbox, filled with all the latest HR news and research. Sign up at shrm.org/HR Daily, plus follow SHRM on social media for even more clips and stories. Like, share, and add to the comments, because real change starts with real talk.
SHRM. This podcast is approved for 0.5 professional development credits, also known as PDCs, towards SHRM CP and SHRM SCP recertification. Enter the following PDC activity ID in your SHRM activity portal to log your credit: 27A3D34. Again, the PDC code is 27A3D34. This code expires February 1st, 2027.